Now that your wife is gone, mourn quietly and then leave. This house was never really yours anyway, my sister-in-law Cassandra declared, standing in my own kitchen like she owned the place. My brother Thaddeus nodded along, avoiding my eyes. They thought they could erase 32 years of my life with one conversation. I didn't argue, I didn't pack. Instead, I walked to my study and pulled out a document that would change everything. The coffee mug trembled in my hands as I sat at the kitchen table that Evelyn and I had picked out together in 1991. 10 days since we'd buried my wife of 32 years. 10 days of expecting some semblance of comfort from the family we'd built, loved, and sacrificed for. Instead, Cassandra paced around my kitchen like a predator circling wounded prey. Thaddeus, my younger brother by 3 years, couldn't meet my gaze, the man I'd helped through college, whose wedding I'd paid for, whose children called me Uncle Dorian with genuine affection. He sat there fidgeting with his wedding ring like it burned his finger. "We need to discuss your living situation," Cassandra announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She'd always been ambitious, calculating, but I'd never seen her this cold. Not toward me. The casserole neighbors had brought grew cold between us. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew where this conversation was heading. "This house is far too large for one person," she continued, gesturing around the kitchen where Evelyn had hosted countless family gatherings. "It's impractical, expensive, and honestly, Dorian, you're rattling around here like a lost soul." Rattling around, as if 32 years of mortgage payments of maintaining every inch of this home for family dinners and holiday celebrations meant nothing, as if I was some inconvenience to be managed rather than a man grieving his life partner. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I set down my mug before my shaking hands could betray more of my shock. Cassandra's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Senior living, assisted care, somewhere more appropriate for your age and circumstances." Thaddeus finally spoke, his voice carrying forced patience like he was explaining simple concepts to a child. "Dorian, you're 71. Evelyn's gone. You shouldn't be alone in this big house." Then came the words that would haunt me forever. "Now that your wife is gone, mourn quietly and then leave. This house was never really yours anyway." The brutality of it stole my breath. Never really yours. As if 3 decades of mortgage payments, property taxes, and home improvements were just some temporary arrangement. As if Evelyn and I hadn't poured our hearts and savings into every corner of this place. I waited for Thaddeus to gasp, to protest, to show some fragment of the brother I'd raised after our parents died when he was 19. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Cassandra's right, Dorian. It's time to be practical." Practical. They were repackaging exile as common sense. Something inside me crystallized in that moment, not broke. Crystallized, like water freezing into something harder, colder, more purposeful. I'd spent 43 years as a real estate attorney, specializing in property law and estate planning. I'd helped thousands of families navigate ownership disputes, inheritance battles, and property transfers. They thought they were talking to a grieving old man. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. I stood slowly, my legs steadier than they'd been in days. "I see," I said quietly. 2 words that held 32 years of marriage, 43 years of legal expertise, and 10 days of grief they'd weaponized against me. "Smart choice," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with smugness. "We'll help you look at places tomorrow. There's a lovely assisted living facility in Riverside. Clean, safe, appropriate." I walked to the hallway closet and pulled on my jacket. Behind me, Thaddeus's voice carried relief, like he'd just avoided an unpleasant chore. "We're doing this for your own good, Dorian. You'll see." I didn't respond. Couldn't respond. The front door closed behind me with a soft click that seemed to echo through my chest. The afternoon air was crisp against my face as I stood on my own front porch, looking back at windows that had glowed with warmth and love for over 3 decades. As I walked to my car, each step measured and deliberate, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was done looking backward. Something new was taking shape in the space where my trust used to be. They wanted me gone. But first, I had some research to do. I drove straight to my old law office in downtown Sacramento, where my former partner Helena Vasquez still practiced. 43 years in real estate law had taught me that every property transaction leaves a paper trail, and my house would be no exception. "Dorian." Helena's smile was genuine as she looked up from her desk. "I'm so sorry about Evelyn. How are you holding up?" "Day by day," I replied, settling into the familiar leather chair across from her desk. "Helena, I need to review some property records. Specifically, my house on Maple Grove." Her expression shifted to professional concern. "Is there a problem with the title?" "That's what I'm trying to determine." I pulled out the address and legal description I'd memorized decades ago. "I need a complete chain of title search, going back to original purchase in 1991. Helena's fingers danced across her keyboard, accessing the county recorder's database. Within minutes, she was scrolling through documents that made her eyebrows rise incrementally. "Dorian, this is interesting. The original deed shows you and Evelyn as joint tenants with right of survivorship." She paused, reading more carefully. "But there's something else here. A quitclaim deed filed just 6 months ago." My chest tightened. What kind of quitclaim deed? "It appears Evelyn transferred her half-interest to—" Helena's voice trailed off as she read the grantee's name. "To Thaddeus Morrison. Your brother?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's impossible. Evelyn would never—" "Dorian, I'm looking at a notarized document with her signature." Helena's voice was gentle but firm. Dated October 15th, 2023. About 6 months before she passed. October 15th, 3 weeks before Evelyn's terminal cancer diagnosis was confirmed, 3 weeks before the world collapsed around us. "Helena, I need copies of everything. Every document, every filing, every piece of paper related to this property." "Of course." She was already printing. "Dorian, there's something else. The quitclaim deed has a specific clause. It only takes effect upon Evelyn's death, and only if certain conditions are met." "What conditions?" Helena's face went pale as she read the fine print. "If the surviving spouse remarries, becomes incapacitated, or if the family deems the property inappropriately maintained by the survivor." Family deems. They hadn't just planned to steal my house. They'd manipulated my dying wife into giving them the legal mechanism to do it. Back in my study, I spread Helena's documents across my desk like pieces of a puzzle that revealed a devastating picture. The quitclaim deed bore Evelyn's signature, but something about it nagged at my legal mind. The handwriting looked shaky, uncertain, nothing like her usual confident script. I opened the filing cabinet where we'd kept financial records for decades. Behind the insurance policies, I found what I was looking for: medical records from Evelyn's final year. October 15th, 2023, the date on the quitclaim deed. According to her oncologist's notes, Evelyn had been on high-dose pain medication that day, morphine specifically. Her mental state was listed as confused and disoriented due to medication adjustments. My hands trembled as I reached for the photo on my desk. Evelyn at our 30th anniversary celebration, radiant and proud, her arms wrapped around me in front of our rose garden. The same garden she'd spent 15 years cultivating, the same house she'd called her sanctuary. The memories flooded back. 3 years ago when I'd helped Thaddeus buy his first house, $45,000 for the down payment because his credit was damaged from a failed business venture. "I'll pay you back, Dorian. Every dollar with interest," he'd promised. 5 years before that, when Cassandra needed money for her mother's medical bills and $23,000 I'd transferred without hesitation. "Family takes care of family," she'd said, tears in her eyes. The year we'd paid for their daughter Emily's wedding, $31,000 for the reception at the country club. "Uncle Dorian, you're the best. I'll never forget this," Emily had whispered during our dance. 7 different occasions over the years, totaling $127,000 in loans that had somehow transformed into gifts through their practiced combination of gratitude and selective memory. But it was the smaller memory that hurt most. Last Christmas, just 3 months before Evelyn's death, we'd hosted dinner for 23 family members. Cassandra had pulled me aside in the kitchen. Dorian, I want you to know how much this house means to our family. All the memories, all the love. Promise me you'll never sell it to strangers. Never, I'd assured her. This house stays in the family forever. Forever. She'd known exactly what she was doing. Dawn found me staring at my laptop screen surrounded by legal documents and case law research. 43 years of property law had taught me that every deed could be challenged, especially when obtained through questionable circumstances. I'd identified 3 potential legal approaches. First, undue influence. Evelyn had signed the quitclaim while heavily medicated and emotionally vulnerable. Second, lack of consideration. The deed transferred valuable property for no compensation. Third, fraud in the execution. The timing suggested she may not have fully understood what she was signing. My phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. Found a perfect place in Riverside. Tour scheduled for 2 p.m. today. So excited to help you start this new chapter. New chapter, as if being forced from my home was some kind of gift. I called Helena. I need you to file a quiet title action immediately. Challenge the quitclaim deed on grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. Dorian, that's going to be expensive. Court costs, expert witnesses, medical testimony. Money isn't an issue. I need this filed today before they try to force me out. Consider it done, but Dorian, you should know, if we win, Thaddeus could face serious legal consequences. Fraud allegations, possible criminal charges. Then he should have thought of that before he manipulated my dying wife. Next, I called Dr. Patricia Zimmerman, Evelyn's oncologist. Doctor, I need your professional opinion about my wife's mental state on October 15, 2023. Mr. Morrison, I remember that day clearly. Evelyn was heavily sedated due to pain management adjustments. She was confused, asking for her mother who'd been dead for 20 years. I specifically noted in her chart that she shouldn't make any major decisions while on that medication regimen. Would you testify to that in court? Absolutely. What she signed that day, if she signed anything, would be legally questionable at best. By noon, I'd assembled a team. Helena for litigation doctor, Zimmerman for medical testimony, and a handwriting expert to analyze the signature discrepancies. But more importantly, I'd realized something Thaddeus and Cassandra hadn't considered. As a real estate attorney, I'd been meticulous about property records. Every improvement, every tax payment, every legal document had been filed properly, including one document they'd never thought to check. I pulled out my safe deposit box key and smiled for the first time in 10 days. Tuesday afternoon brought the confrontation I'd been preparing for. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard Cassandra's car in my driveway. Through the front window, I watched her stride toward my door with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. She wasn't alone. Thaddeus followed behind her, carrying what appeared to be real estate brochures. They'd actually brought marketing materials for assisted living facilities. The doorbell rang twice, sharp and insistent. Dorian, Cassandra's voice carried forced cheerfulness. Time for our appointment. I took my time answering, adjusting my tie, checking my appearance in the hallway mirror. When dealing with people who'd underestimated you, presentation was everything. Cassandra, Thaddeus. I stepped aside, allowing them entry but making no welcoming gestures. Please come in. They followed me to the living room, where I'd carefully arranged several documents on the coffee table. Legal papers, medical records, and one particular file folder they couldn't see yet. The facility in Riverside is absolutely perfect, Cassandra began, spreading glossy brochures across my documents. Private apartment, meals included, activities coordinator. You'll love it. Will I? I kept my voice professionally neutral. Before we discuss my future living arrangements, perhaps we should clarify who has the authority to make such decisions. Thaddeus shifted uncomfortably. Dorian, we've been through this. The house situation is complicated, but... Complicated. I picked up Helena's legal analysis. Interesting choice of words. Thaddeus, are you familiar with California Probate Code Section 259? His face went pale. As a former real estate investor, he should have known the statute. What does that have to do with anything? It specifically addresses property transfers obtained through undue influence on incapacitated persons. I handed him the medical records. Dr. Zimmerman's notes indicate Evelyn was heavily medicated and disoriented on October 15th, the same day she allegedly signed your quitclaim deed. Cassandra's confident demeanor cracked slightly. Allegedly? Dorian, that's a legal document with proper notarization. From a notary who never actually witnessed Evelyn's signature, I interrupted, producing another document. I spoke with Patricia Chen this morning. She admitted she notarized the document after the fact, based on your assurance that Evelyn had signed it willingly. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Evelyn's grandfather clock. That's not how it happened, Thaddeus stammered. Then perhaps you can explain how it did happen, under oath in court tomorrow. Cassandra's composure shattered completely. Court? Dorian, what are you talking about? I opened the final folder and spread its contents across the table. Legal filings, case citations, expert witness statements. I filed a quiet title action this morning. The court will determine the validity of Evelyn's quitclaim deed, specifically whether it was obtained through fraud, undue influence, or from someone legally incapacitated. Thaddeus was reading the medical records, his face growing paler with each page. She was asking for Mom that day, I remember. But she seemed lucid when we discussed the deed. Lucid? I pulled out Dr. Zimmerman's sworn affidavit. According to her oncologist, Evelyn was so disoriented she couldn't remember basic facts. She thought it was 1987. She called me by her first husband's name. First husband? Cassandra looked confused. Exactly. Evelyn was never married before me. That's how confused she was. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the rose garden. Yet somehow, in that mental state, you convinced her to sign away half of our home. We didn't convince her of anything, Cassandra's voice pitched higher. She wanted to protect the family property. She said so herself. What she said, according to witnesses, was, I don't want strangers living in Mom's house. She thought she was protecting her childhood home in Oregon, a house that was demolished in 1995. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. They were processing the magnitude of their legal exposure, fraud, elder abuse, potentially criminal charges. But more importantly, I continued, returning to my chair with calm authority, there's something else you forgot to check. I pulled out a document they'd never seen before, a deed, older than theirs, with official county stamps and notarized signatures. What's that? Thaddeus whispered. The original deed from 1991, the one you should have researched before you started your little scheme. I placed it directly in front of them. Take a close look at the ownership structure. Cassandra grabbed the document, her eyes scanning desperately. Her face went white as she found the relevant section. That's impossible, she breathed. Read it aloud, Cassandra. I want Thaddeus to hear this. Her voice shook as she read. Property held in joint tenancy with right of survivorship, with remainder interest to Dorian Morrison individually, as specified in attached life estate agreement. The document trembled in Cassandra's hands as the full implications hit her. Life estate agreement? What does that mean? I smiled for the first time since Evelyn's funeral. It means, dear sister-in-law, that regardless of what Evelyn signed, she could only transfer property she actually owned. And according to the original deed structure I created as a real estate attorney, she only owned a life estate interest. Thaddeus was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Dorian, I don't understand. Of course you don't. You assumed I was just a grieving old man who didn't understand property law. I pulled out another document. This is the life estate agreement, filed with the county in 1991. Evelyn had the right to live in this house for her natural life. Upon her death, full ownership automatically reverts to me, regardless of any quitclaim deeds, regardless of any other transfers. The color drained from Cassandra's face, but the quitclaim deed is worthless. You can't transfer property you don't own. Even if Evelyn had been mentally competent, which she wasn't, she had no legal authority to give Thaddeus anything more than her life estate, which ended when she died. I stood and walked to my filing cabinet, retrieving one final document. But here's the truly interesting part. This is the police report I filed this morning. Police report? Thaddeus's voice cracked. For elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to steal real property. The district attorney is very interested in cases involving the exploitation of dying seniors. I handed him the incident report number. Detective Rodriguez will be contacting you both for interviews. Cassandra collapsed back onto the couch. Dorian, please. We're family. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. Didn't mean for what to happen? For you to manipulate my dying wife into signing documents she couldn't understand? For you to plot my removal from my own home while I was planning her funeral? We thought she owned half the house, Thaddeus whispered. You thought wrong. 43 years as a real estate attorney, and you assumed I'd structure my most important asset carelessly. I returned to my chair, studying their defeated faces. You confused grief with incompetence, age with vulnerability. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the room where their dreams of inheriting my property had just died. What happens now? Cassandra asked quietly. Now? Now you leave my house and never question my right to live here again. But I wasn't finished. They'd tried to steal my home, manipulate my dying wife, and exile me in my grief. Justice required a complete accounting. Before you leave, I said, walking to my desk and opening a thick folder, I think you should understand exactly how thoroughly you've been outmaneuvered. I spread out a timeline I'd prepared, documenting every aspect of their scheme. Phone records, medical appointments, financial transactions. This shows the pattern of your visits to Evelyn during her final months. Notice how they coincide with her pain medication increases. Thaddeus stared at the documents. We were visiting because she was sick. You visited specifically on days when she was most vulnerable. October 3rd, when her morphine dosage doubled. October 10th, when she was hallucinating from medication interactions. And finally, October 15th, when Dr. Zimmerman's notes show she was completely disoriented. I pulled out bank records. This shows the deposit you made 3 days after Evelyn signed the quitclaim deed. $15,000 from a home equity loan against your current house. You were already spending money you thought you'd inherit. Cassandra's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. That loan had nothing to do with... Everything has to do with everything when you're building a fraud case. I showed them another document. This is your daughter Emily's college enrollment. Full tuition paid in advance for the spring semester. Another $23,000 you spent based on property you thought you were stealing. The room fell silent as they processed the scope of evidence I'd compiled. You planned this for months, I continued. The assisted living facility tour you mentioned, I called them. You've been receiving brochures since September, 2 months before Evelyn's terminal diagnosis was confirmed. That's not... Thaddeus couldn't finish the sentence. Here's what actually happened, I said, leaning back in my chair with the calm authority of complete victory. You saw Evelyn's illness as an opportunity. You manipulated a dying woman into signing away property she didn't own, then planned to use her death as leverage to force me out of my own home. I stood and walked to the window overlooking Evelyn's rose garden. You assumed I was weak because I was grieving, incompetent because I was old, helpless because I was trusting. You confused kindness with stupidity. Dorian, please, Cassandra's voice broke. You forgot that I spent 4 decades helping people protect their property from exactly this kind of scheme. I returned to my chair and pulled out my checkbook, the sound of the pen against paper sharp in the silence. Here's what's going to happen now. I wrote quickly and tore off a check, placing it face down on the coffee table. This is a check for $127,000. Every dollar I've ever loaned you over the years. Thaddeus looked confused. What does that mean? It means your loans are now officially loans, not gifts, with interest, compounded annually at the legal maximum rate. I slid a payment schedule across the table. Your first payment of $2,847 is due in 30 days. We can't afford, Cassandra started. Then you'll sell your house, downsize your lifestyle, and learn to live within your means, just like you expected me to do. I pulled out another document. This is a promissory note. Sign it, or I'll pursue criminal charges for the attempted property theft." Cassandra stared at the payment schedule like it was a death sentence. "This will bankrupt us." "Bankruptcy is preferable to prison. The choice is yours." Thaddeus picked up the pen with trembling hands. "If we sign this, the criminal charges go away. The fraud charges remain active until you've completed restitution, but I'll recommend leniency if you comply with the payment schedule and issue a public apology." Public apology? A full-page ad in the Sacramento Bee acknowledging your attempted exploitation of my wife and apologizing for your cruelty to a grieving widower. You damaged my reputation in this community. You'll repair it. They signed the documents like condemned prisoners accepting their fate. "One final condition," I said as they prepared to leave. "You're both banned from this property indefinitely. If I see either of you on my land without permission, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Cassandra turned back at the door, her face twisted with impotent rage. "This isn't over, Dorian. You're absolutely right. It's not over. It's just beginning under new management. Mine." After they left, I walked through my house slowly, touching the furniture Evelyn and I had chosen together, admiring the photos of our life together, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender sachets still tucked into closet corners. In my study, I opened Evelyn's photo and smiled at her gentle face. "I kept our home safe, sweetheart, just like I promised." The phone rang. Helena, calling with updates on the legal proceedings. "Dorian, the district attorney's office is very interested in your case. They're treating it as a test case for elder abuse prosecution. Your documentation is so thorough, they're calling it a textbook example of how to protect yourself from family fraud." "What about the quitclaim deed?" "Completely voided. The judge reviewed Dr. Zimmerman's testimony and ruled that Evelyn lacked the mental capacity to execute any legal documents that day. The deed is null and void." I hung up and poured myself a scotch, settling into Evelyn's favorite reading chair. Outside, the evening painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The roses she'd planted were blooming magnificently this year. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily, my niece. "Uncle Dorian, I heard about the legal problems. I'm so sorry. Mom and Dad never told me what really happened with Aunt Evelyn. Can we talk?" Not everyone in the family had been corrupted by Cassandra's greed. Some relationships could be salvaged, built on honesty instead of manipulation. 3 weeks later, the Sacramento Bee published their apology, a full-page ad acknowledging their inappropriate attempt to pressure a grieving widower into abandoning his family home, and their deep regret for exploiting the illness of a beloved family member. The payments started arriving monthly, $2,847 every 30 days, like clockwork. Thaddeus and Cassandra had sold their house and moved into a small apartment. Justice, I discovered, came with a detailed payment schedule. 6 months later, I stood in Evelyn's rose garden, tending the flowers she'd loved so much. The house remained exactly as we'd left it, our sanctuary, our legacy, our proof that love creates something lasting in this world. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Emily standing on my porch, holding a bouquet of roses and wearing the nervous expression of someone hoping for forgiveness. "Uncle Dorian?" "I brought these from my garden. Aunt Evelyn always said roses were for new beginnings." I opened the door and embraced my niece, feeling the healing that comes when family members choose love over greed, honesty over manipulation. "Come in, sweetheart. Let's make some coffee and talk about your aunt. I have so many stories to share." As we sat in the kitchen where Cassandra had tried to banish me, Emily listened to tales of Evelyn's courage, her kindness, her fierce protection of the people she loved. The house filled with laughter again, with memories shared and preserved. "Uncle Dorian," Emily said as she prepared to leave, "I'm proud of how you protected Aunt Evelyn's memory and your home. Some people think fighting back makes you cruel, but sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do." After she left, I returned to my study and opened the safe where I kept our most precious documents. The original deed, the life estate agreement, the photos of Evelyn and me building our life together, brick by brick, year by year. They'd tried to erase 32 years of marriage, 43 years of professional expertise, and a lifetime of love with one cruel conversation. Instead, they'd learned that some things, homes, marriages, dignity, are worth fighting for. The house settled into comfortable silence around me. In the distance, I could hear the neighborhood children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Life continues, love endures, and sometimes justice prevails. Outside my window, Evelyn's roses bloomed in brilliant profusion, tended by hands that would never abandon the garden she'd created, in the house that would always be ours.